Roman Crane walked into Notte, and the entire room stopped breathing. New York's most feared kingpin, the man who owned Manhattan's skyline. But his date just made a fatal mistake. She laughed at the waitress. She can't even read the wine list, Roman. Pathetic. She didn't know that the trembling waitress held a secret that could burn their entire empire to the ground. And when Elena finally spoke, she didn't just read the menu. She silenced the devil himself. 2 hours before the devil walked into La Notte, Elena Sinclair woke up to the sound of dripping water. The pipe above her bed had been leaking for 3 weeks. She had placed a bucket underneath, but it was already full. Brown water spilled onto the floor, mixing with the dust and the dead cockroaches she had stopped bothering to clean. Brooklyn in winter was unforgiving. The radiator in her apartment had died sometime in November. The landlord never fixed it. Elena had learned to sleep in 2 sweaters and a coat. She sat up slowly, her head spinning. When was the last time she had eaten a real meal? 3 days ago. Maybe 4. She had lost count. The room was barely 10 feet wide. Mold crawled up the walls like black veins. The window was cracked, stuffed with old newspapers to keep out the wind. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling, flickering every few minutes like it was counting down to something. This was not a home. This was a coffin with a door. Elena stood up and walked to the refrigerator. She opened it, already knowing what she would find. Nothing. An empty ketchup bottle, a box of baking soda, the faint smell of something that had rotted long ago. Her stomach cramped. She pressed her hand against it, willing the pain to stop. Her phone buzzed on the mattress. She picked it up, already knowing who it was. Mr. Kowalski, rent is 4 weeks late. You have until Friday. After that, your stuff goes on the sidewalk. Friday. That was 2 days away. Elena stared at the message for a long moment. Then she put the phone down without replying. She walked to the small mirror hanging crookedly on the wall. The glass was cracked down the middle, splitting her reflection in 2. She barely recognized the woman staring back. Hollow cheeks, dark circles under her eyes so deep they looked like bruises. Her skin was pale, almost gray. Her hair, once thick and shining, hung limp and lifeless around her face. She was 27 years old. She looked 40. 5 years of running had done this to her. 5 years of hiding. 5 years of watching over her shoulder, of jumping at every sound, of trusting no one. 5 years of surviving, but barely living. Elena knelt down beside the bed. She pried up a loose floorboard, her fingers finding the small metal box she had hidden there. Inside were 2 things, a USB drive and a photograph. She picked up the photograph first. The edges were worn from being held too many times. It showed a family standing in front of a white house in Connecticut, a tall man with kind eyes and gray hair, a beautiful woman with Elena's same green eyes, laughing at something off camera, and a younger Elena, 19 years old, standing between them in a graduation gown. That was the last photo they had taken together. Before Marcus Webb destroyed everything, Elena traced her mother's face with her fingertip. Catherine Sinclair had died 3 days after the scandal broke. Heart attack, the doctor said, but Elena knew the truth. Her mother had died of grief. A tear slid down Elena's cheek. She did not wipe it away. "I'm still here, Mom," she whispered. "I'm still fighting." She looked at the USB drive. Such a small thing, barely the size of her thumb, but it contained enough evidence to bring down one of the most powerful men in New York. Enough evidence to clear her father's name. Enough evidence to get them both killed. Elena put everything back in the box and closed the floorboard. She stood up and walked to the closet. Inside hung a single uniform. Black dress, white apron. The collar was frayed. The hem was coming undone, but it was clean. She put it on, moving mechanically. One more day. Just survive one more day. That had been her mantra for 5 years. She grabbed her coat, checked her reflection one last time, and opened the door. The hallway smelled like cigarettes and despair. Elena stepped out into the cold Brooklyn evening, not knowing that in 2 hours, her entire life would change. Not knowing that the most dangerous man in New York was about to walk into her restaurant, and not knowing that by midnight, she would be standing at a crossroads between death and destiny. The subway car rattled through the tunnel, shaking Elena's bones. She stood near the door, one hand gripping the metal pole, her body swaying with the movement of the train. The car was packed with the usual evening crowd, tired faces, empty eyes, people going somewhere, but not really living. Elena fit right in. She stared at the floor, counting the stops in her head. 3 more until Manhattan, 3 more until La Notte, 3 more until another night of being invisible. Then she looked up, and her heart stopped. There, on the wall of the subway car, was an advertisement. a bottle of wine against a backdrop of rolling hills and golden sunlight. The text read, Napa Valley, where dreams are bottled. Elena could not breathe. The memories crashed into her like a wave she could not stop. 8 years ago, she was 19 years old, standing in the middle of a vineyard in California. The sun was warm on her face. The air smelled of earth and ripening grapes. She was wearing a white sundress, laughing at something her professor had said. The Napa Valley Wine Academy, the most prestigious sommelier school in the country. And Elena Sinclair was their star student. She could identify over 300 wines by taste alone. She spoke fluent Italian, French, Spanish, and English. She could tell you the soil composition of a Burgundy vineyard just by swirling a glass. Her classmates called her the prodigy. Her professors said she had a gift that could not be taught, and her future was limitless. Back then, Elena Sinclair was not a waitress scraping by on stale bread. She was the daughter of Robert Sinclair, Deputy Secretary of the Treasury. Her mother, Catherine, was a celebrated interior designer whose clients included senators and CEOs. They lived in a white colonial house in Connecticut, 12 bedrooms, a tennis court, a wine cellar that rivaled some restaurants. Elena remembered the dinner parties, crystal chandeliers, women in designer gowns, men discussing politics and money in hushed, important tones, and her father, always at the center, with his warm smile and kind eyes. My daughter is going to change the wine world, he used to say, his hand on her shoulder. Just you wait. Elena believed him. She believed everything would be perfect forever. Then 5 years ago, the world collapsed. It started with a headline, Deputy Secretary Sinclair accused of embezzlement. Elena remembered reading it on her phone, certain it was a mistake. Her father was the most honest man she knew. He would never steal anything. But the evidence was overwhelming. Bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, shell companies with his signature, millions of dollars that could not be explained. Her father swore he was innocent. He said he had been framed. No one believed him. The man who framed him was Marcus Webb, her father's closest friend, his most trusted partner, the man who had bounced Elena on his knee when she was a child and called her little princess. Marcus Webb had orchestrated everything. He had planted the evidence, manipulated the accounts, and watched from the shadows as Robert Sinclair's life burned to the ground. 3 days after the scandal broke, Catherine Sinclair collapsed in their living room. Massive heart attack. She was dead before the ambulance arrived. Elena held her mother's hand as the paramedics pronounced her gone. 1 week later, her father disappeared. Not arrested, not hiding, taken. Elena received a single message from an unknown number, the USB drive, or he dies. She had been running ever since. New identity, new city, new life. Elena Sinclair, sommelier prodigy, became Elena the waitress. Invisible, forgotten, surviving on tips and scraps. The subway screeched to a halt. Elena blinked. The advertisement stared back at her, mocking her with memories of a life she could never reclaim. Manhattan. This is Manhattan, the automated voice announced. Elena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She stepped off the train and climbed the stairs into the cold night air. Somewhere above her, the towers of New York glittered like diamonds against the dark sky. She did not look up. She just walked. Notte sat on the corner of 53rd and Madison like a dark secret waiting to be told. From the outside, it looked elegant, understated. A black awning with gold lettering, velvet ropes that never moved, a doorman who could spot old money from 50 feet away. But everyone in New York knew what Notte really was. It was where the powerful came to make deals that never appeared on paper, where politicians dined with men whose names appeared in FBI files, where fortunes changed hands over bottles of wine that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Notte was neutral ground, sacred ground, and Elena worked there. She slipped through the back entrance, past the dumpsters and the delivery trucks. The kitchen door was propped open, steam and shouting pouring out into the alley. Inside was chaos, controlled chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Pans clanging, flames shooting up from stovetops, chefs barking orders in a mixture of Italian and English. Elena moved through it like a ghost. No one noticed her. No one ever did. She found a corner near the dishwashing station and leaned against the wall, catching her breath. The walk from the subway had taken more out of her than it should have. Her legs felt weak. Her vision kept blurring at the edges. 3 days without real food would do that. Hey, catch. Elena looked up. Tony, the sous chef, tossed something at her. She caught it on instinct. A bread roll. Day old, probably. Hard around the edges. Tony winked at her. You look like death, Sinclair. Eat something before you pass out on a customer. Elena wanted to refuse. Pride told her to throw it back. Hunger told her something else. She turned away and bit into the bread, chewing quickly, swallowing before anyone could see. It was stale and tasteless, but her stomach did not care. It was food. Sinclair, the voice cut through the kitchen noise like a blade. Elena froze. She knew that voice. Mr. Harrison, the floor manager, emerged from the swinging doors. He was a tall man, thin as a skeleton, with gray hair slicked back, and eyes that had never held warmth a day in his life. His suit was immaculate. His expression was stone. He looked at Elena the way one might look at a stain on expensive fabric. My office. Now. Elena followed him through the kitchen, past the prep stations, into a small room cluttered with schedules and invoices. Harrison closed the door behind her. Tonight is different, he said without preamble. We have VIPs coming. Table 4, table 4. Elena's station. Her stomach tightened. Who? She asked, though part of her did not want to know. Harrison's eyes narrowed. The Crane family. The words hit Elena like ice water. Crane. Everyone in New York knew that name. Everyone feared it. The Crane family had controlled the city's underworld for 3 generations. They owned the docks, the unions, half the real estate in Manhattan. Politicians answered their calls. Judges looked the other way. Police commissioners played golf with them on weekends. And Roman Crane was the worst of them all. The youngest son, the heir, the man they called the Silent King because when he stopped talking, people started dying. Roman Crane is coming here? Elena's voice came out barely above a whisper. Personally, Harrison stepped closer, his voice dropping. This is not a night for mistakes, Sinclair. One wrong move, one spilled glass, one moment of incompetence, and you are gone. Do you understand? Elena nodded. Her throat was too dry to speak. Table 4 is yours. Serve them perfectly, or do not bother coming back tomorrow. Harrison opened the door, dismissing her without another word. Elena walked back onto the floor in a daze. The restaurant was beginning to fill with the early evening crowd. Soft music played, candles flickered on white tablecloths. She stopped at the edge of the dining room and looked across at table 4. It sat empty in the corner, the best table in the house, reserved for kings and monsters. In 1 hour, the most dangerous man in New York would sit there, and Elena would have to serve him. Her hands trembled as she straightened her apron. One more night. Just survive one more night. At exactly 8 o'clock, the front doors of Notte opened, and the entire restaurant stopped breathing. Elena was standing near the service station, arranging silverware on a tray, when she felt it. A shift in the air. A sudden heaviness that pressed down on everyone in the room. She looked up, and she saw him. Roman Crane walked into Notte like he owned it. Because in many ways, he did. He was tall. Over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled his suit jacket like it had been painted onto his body. His hair was black, slightly wavy, pushed back from his forehead in a way that looked effortless but probably cost more than Elena's rent. His suit was charcoal gray, bespoke, Italian, the kind of suit that did not have a price tag because if you had to ask, you could not afford it. A Patek Philippe watch glinted on his wrist, catching the candlelight, but it was his face that made Elena's breath catch. He was handsome, devastatingly so. The kind of handsome that felt dangerous. A square jaw that could have been carved from marble. High cheekbones, a straight nose, and his eyes, gray, cold, empty. They swept across the room like a predator surveying its territory, taking in everything, missing nothing. Those eyes had probably watched men die. Those eyes had probably given the order. There was a small scar above his left eyebrow, thin and faded, but visible if you looked closely. Elena wondered what kind of violence had put it there. He did not smile. He did not nod. He simply walked. Every step was measured, controlled. The walk of a man who had never hurried in his life because the world waited for him, not the other way around. Behind him came 2 men, bodyguards, mountains of muscle in black suits, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. One of them, Elena would later learn, was named Dante. He had the face of a man who had broken bones for a living and felt nothing about it. And then came the woman. She walked slightly behind Roman, her arm not quite touching his. She was beautiful in the way a diamond is beautiful. Cold, hard, designed to be displayed. Her dress was red, blood red. It clung to her body like a second skin, leaving little to the imagination. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, cascading over one shoulder. Her makeup was flawless. Her jewelry was real. Victoria Wells. Elena had seen her picture in tabloids, the daughter of a real estate tycoon. a socialite who attended every gala, every charity event, every party that mattered. And for the past 6 months, she had been seen on Roman Crane's arm, the woman who wanted to be queen. The reaction in the restaurant was immediate. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks froze halfway to mouths. A waiter nearly dropped a bottle of wine. Even the soft background music seemed to fade, as if the speakers themselves were afraid to make noise. The wealthy and powerful patrons of Notte were used to important people, but this was different. This was Roman Crane. Men who ran corporations avoided his gaze. Women who commanded boardrooms suddenly found their napkins fascinating. A state senator at table 12 looked like he might be sick. Mr. Harrison materialized at the entrance, bowing so low his spine must have ached. "Mr. Crane," he said, his voice trembling with forced composure. "What an honor. Your table is ready, sir. Right this way." Roman did not acknowledge him. He simply walked forward, and the sea of tables seemed to part before him. Elena stood frozen at the service station. Her hands gripped the tray so tightly her knuckles turned white. She watched as Harrison led the party across the dining room, past table 1, past table 2, past table 3, and then they stopped. At table 4, her table, Roman Crane sat down, his back to the wall, his eyes facing the door, a predator's position, always watching, always ready. Victoria slid into the seat beside him, already scanning the room to see who was looking at her. The bodyguards took positions nearby, standing, watching. Harrison hovered for a moment, then retreated, and Elena realized with cold certainty that in 30 seconds she would have to walk over there. She would have to serve the devil himself. Her heart slammed against her ribs like a trapped animal. One mistake. Harrison's words echoed in her mind. One mistake, and you are gone. She took a breath, then another, and she began to walk toward table 4. Elena counted to 30 in her head. It was the rule. Give VIP guests exactly 30 seconds to settle before approaching. Long enough to seem respectful, short enough to seem attentive. 28, 29, 30. She picked up the crystal water pitcher from the service station. Her hands were trembling. She pressed her fingers tighter around the handle, willing them to stop. They did not stop. She began to walk. Each step felt like wading through concrete. Her legs were heavy, her chest was tight. The distance from the service station to table 4 was maybe 20 feet, but it felt like a mile. Keep your eyes down. That was the rule she had learned in her first week at Notte. Do not make eye contact with powerful men. Do not draw attention. Do not exist unless spoken to. Look down. Stay alive. Elena kept her gaze fixed on the white tablecloth as she approached. She could see the edge of Roman's suit jacket, the glint of his watch, the manicured fingers of Victoria's hand resting on the table, red nails like drops of blood against the linen. She stopped at the appropriate distance. Not too close, not too far. Good evening. Her voice came out softer than she intended. She cleared her throat slightly. Water for the table? Roman did not look up. He was checking his phone, scrolling through something with the casual disinterest of a man who had 1,000 more important things to think about than a waitress offering water. His jaw was set. His expression was unreadable. He waved one hand, a dismissive gesture, a king granting permission to a servant. Elena began to pour, sparkling. The voice was sharp, cold, dripping with contempt. Elena looked up before she could stop herself. Victoria was staring at her. Those ice-blue eyes moved slowly down Elena's body, taking inventory, judging. The gaze lingered on Elena's shoes, scuffed black flats, worn thin at the soles, then moved up to her uniform. The frayed collar, the hem that was starting to unravel, the apron that had been washed so many times it was turning gray. Victoria's lips curled into a smile that held no warmth. "Sparkling water," she repeated, as if speaking to a child. "And bring the wine list, the reserve list." She paused, letting the words sink in. Not the house garbage. The insult was casual, almost lazy, the way someone might swat at a fly. Elena felt her cheeks burn, but she kept her face blank. She had learned that too. Never react. Never show weakness. Never give them the satisfaction. "Certainly, madam." She bowed her head slightly and turned away from the table. The reserve wine list was kept in a locked cabinet near the sommelier station, a heavy leather-bound book that contained vintages worth more than Elena would make in 10 years. She walked toward it, her back straight, her face calm, but inside, her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She had no idea that in 5 minutes, that wine list would change everything. The reserve wine list weighed nearly 5 pounds. Elena carried it back to table 4 with both hands, the leather cover smooth and cold against her fingers. This book was older than she was, hand-bound in Florence, worth more than everything she owned combined. She had touched it perhaps 3 times in her 2 years at Notte. It was reserved for guests who could afford bottles that cost more than cars. Guests like Roman Crane. Elena approached the table and placed the book gently in front of him. Not too close, not too far. Exactly where etiquette demanded. The reserve list, sir. Roman did not look at it. He did not look at her. He was still focused on his phone, his brow slightly furrowed, his thumb scrolling through what appeared to be financial reports, millions of dollars moving across the screen like it was nothing. Without lifting his eyes, he pushed the wine list across the table toward Victoria. "Read it for me, darling." His voice was low, a deep baritone that vibrated somewhere in Elena's chest. "I have a headache." Victoria's face lit up. This was her moment. Her chance to prove she belonged at this table, at his side, in his world. She pulled the book toward her with perfectly manicured fingers and opened it with a flourish. "Of course, baby." Her smile was radiant, confident, the smile of a woman who had never failed at anything in her life. Then she looked down at the page, and her smile began to fade. The reserve list at Notte was not written in English. It was not even written in modern Italian. It was handwritten in classical Italian script, the kind used in old Tuscan documents. Flowing calligraphy that described each wine in elaborate detail: region, vineyard, soil composition, harvest year, barrel aging, tasting notes. All of it required not just fluency in Italian, but deep knowledge of viticulture, of wine regions, of the subtle differences between a Barolo and a Barbaresco, a Brunello and a Chianti Classico. Victoria stared at the page like it was written in ancient Greek. She flipped to the next page, then the next. Her eyes darted across the words, searching for something, anything, she could recognize. A bead of sweat appeared at her temple. "It's all Italian, isn't it?" She laughed. The sound was too high, too sharp. "Why don't we just order the Chianti? Everyone loves Chianti." Roman finally looked up from his phone. His gray eyes settled on Victoria with an expression that was completely flat, unreadable, but somehow terrifying. "I don't want Chianti." His voice was soft, dangerously soft. "I want the 1997 Barolo. Find it." Victoria's face went pale. She looked back down at the book, flipping pages frantically now. Her composure was cracking. Her fingers were trembling. She stopped on a random page, pointed at a random line. "Here." Her voice was too loud. "This one. This is it." Elena was standing nearby, refilling the sparkling water glasses. She had not meant to look. She knew better than to look. But her eyes moved on instinct, and she saw what Victoria was pointing at. It was not a Barolo. It was a Montepulciano d'Abruzzo, a simple table wine, the kind Notte kept on the list specifically to catch tourists who pretended to know more than they did. Mr. Harrison called it the trap. $15 a bottle, marked up to $200. Victoria Wells, socialite daughter of a real estate empire, had just pointed at the cheapest wine in the book. Elena's expression did not change. She kept pouring water, her movements steady. But something flickered in her eyes, a tiny reaction, barely visible, and Victoria saw it. Their eyes met. In that single moment, Victoria understood. The waitress knew. The waitress with the worn shoes and frayed collar knew that Victoria had just made a fool of herself. Victoria's face flushed crimson, and her expression twisted into something ugly. Victoria needed a target. The humiliation was burning through her veins like acid. She had made a mistake. A stupid, public mistake. And the waitress had seen it. The nobody in the worn shoes had witnessed Victoria Wells looking like a fool. That could not stand. Victoria's survival instinct kicked in. The same instinct that had carried her through a lifetime of high society backstabbing. When you are caught looking weak, attack. Attack fast. Attack hard. Make someone else the victim. She turned on Elena like a snake striking. "Actually," Victoria said, her voice rising, "why don't we ask her?" She pointed one red fingernail directly at Elena's face. Elena froze. The water pitcher in her hand suddenly felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Victoria laughed. It was a cruel sound, sharp and brittle, echoing through the restaurant like breaking glass. "Look at her." Victoria gestured dramatically at Elena, making sure everyone in the room could see. She was staring at the page like it was a math problem, like she was trying to solve some great mystery. The restaurant had gone completely silent. Every conversation had stopped. Every fork had frozen mid-air. Every eye had turned toward table 4. Victoria fed on the attention. She always did. "She can't even read the wine list, Roman." Victoria's voice was loud now, theatrical, pathetic. The word hung in the air like poison. These places hire anyone off the street nowadays. Victoria shook her head in mock disappointment. No standards at all. I mean, look at her uniform. Look at her shoes. She probably learned English from a television. A few nervous laughs came from nearby tables, the kind of laughter that came from people who were afraid not to laugh. Elena stood perfectly still. She could feel every eye in the room on her. The wealthy patrons in their designer clothes. The other waiters who had worked beside her for 2 years. Mr. Harrison, whose face had gone white as chalk. The humiliation burned in her chest like a hot coal. She had been hungry. She had been tired. She had been invisible. But she had never been publicly destroyed like this. Her fingers tightened around the water pitcher. Her knuckles went white. She could feel her nails digging into her palms through the cloth napkin. Do not react. The voice in her head was screaming. Do not give her the satisfaction. You are invisible. You are nothing. That is how you survive. But the words still cut. They cut because Victoria saw what everyone saw. The frayed collar, the worn shoes, the exhaustion in Elena's eyes, the poverty that clung to her like a shadow. They cut because Victoria was right. To everyone in this room, Elena was nothing. A ghost with a notepad. A piece of furniture that could carry plates. Mr. Harrison took a step forward. His face was twisted with panic. He wanted to intervene. He needed to stop this before it got worse. But he looked at Roman Crane and stopped. You did not interrupt a scene involving the most powerful man in New York. You simply did not. Victoria leaned back in her chair, satisfied. The attack was complete. The humiliation was total. She had won. Elena stood there, burning, and then something shifted. Roman Crane had been silent through all of it. His phone was still in his hand. His expression had not changed. But now, slowly, very slowly, he lifted his head. His gray eyes moved from the phone to Victoria, then from Victoria to Elena. And for the first time that evening, he truly looked at her. Roman Crane looked at Elena, really looked at her. His gray eyes moved slowly, methodically, the way a predator studies its prey before deciding whether to strike. He saw the shoes first. Black flats, worn so thin the shape of her toes was visible through the leather. Scuffed, cracked at the edges. The shoes of someone who walked miles every day and could not afford new ones. His gaze traveled upward. The uniform. Black dress, white apron. Standard La Notte attire. But this one had been washed too many times. The fabric was faded. The collar was fraying. A small tear near the hem had been sewn shut with thread that did not quite match. Her hands, gripping the water pitcher like a lifeline. Knuckles white. Fingernails short and unpolished. Hands that worked. Hands that scrubbed and carried and survived. And then he reached her face. Hollow cheeks. Dark circles under her eyes. Skin that should have been glowing but instead looked pale and tired. But her eyes were different. They were green. A deep, clear green. Like light filtering through leaves. And they were not looking down. They were not cast aside in shame or submission. They were looking directly at him. There was fear in those eyes. He could see it. But there was something else too. Something harder. Something that refused to break. Defiance. Roman felt something stir in his chest. A memory. Unwanted. Unavoidable. 22 years ago. A small apartment in Queens. Peeling wallpaper. A kitchen that smelled like garlic and poverty. His mother, Maria Crane, sitting at the table, still wearing her waitress uniform, black dress, white apron, just like the woman standing before him now. She was crying. Roman was 14 years old, standing in the doorway, watching. What happened, Mama? His mother did not answer at first. She just kept crying, quiet sobs that shook her thin shoulders. Then she told him. A customer at the restaurant where she worked. A rich man. Important. He had humiliated her in front of everyone, called her stupid, called her trash, threw wine in her face because it was not cold enough, and nobody did anything. The manager apologized to the customer. The other waiters looked away. Maria Crane cleaned the wine off her face and finished her shift because she needed the money. 3 days later, Roman came home from school and found her in the bathtub. She had swallowed an entire bottle of pills. The funeral was small, cheap casket, plastic flowers. Only a handful of people came. Roman stood at her grave and made a promise. He would become so powerful that no one would ever humiliate someone like his mother again. Not in front of him, not while he was watching. And if they did, they would pay. The memory faded. Roman was back in La Notte, back at table 4, back looking at a waitress with green eyes who refused to look away. Is that true? His voice was soft, Dangerously soft. The kind of soft that made men twice his size take a step back. Elena's body went rigid. Can you not read the menu? It was a trap. Roman knew it. The woman beside him knew it. Everyone in the restaurant knew it. If Elena said yes, she was admitting incompetence. She would be fired before the night was over. If Elena said no, she was contradicting a guest. At La Notte, that was a death sentence. There was no right answer. Victoria sensed victory. She leaned forward, her smile widening. Of course she can't. Victoria flicked her hand dismissively at Elena, like shooing away an insect. Go get someone who knows what they're doing. Shoo. Roman did not look at Victoria. His eyes remained fixed on Elena. He was watching, waiting, testing. Would she crumble? Would she cry? Would she run away like so many others before her? Or would she do something unexpected? The entire restaurant held its breath. Elena stood there for a long moment. The humiliation still burned in her chest. The fear still crawled through her veins. But something else was rising now. Something that had been buried for 5 years. Something she had almost forgotten existed. Pride. Elena took a deep breath. And everything changed. Elena set the water pitcher down. The sound was soft. A gentle thud against the white tablecloth. But in the suffocating silence of the restaurant, it might as well have been a gunshot. Something shifted in her. She could feel it happening, like a door opening inside her chest. A door she had kept locked for 5 years. Her spine straightened, slowly, vertebra by vertebra. The submissive slouch she had worn like armor began to fall away. Her shoulders rolled back. Her chin lifted. Her eyes, which had been cast down in survival mode, rose to meet the room. She was no longer Elena the waitress. She was Elena Sinclair, daughter of Robert Sinclair, graduate of the Napa Valley Wine Academy, a woman who had once commanded rooms full of sommeliers and left them speechless. And she was done being invisible. When she spoke, her voice was different. Gone was the soft, apologetic tone she used with customers. Gone was the careful American accent she had cultivated to blend in. Instead, the words came out in flawless Italian, classical, musical, the Italian of old Tuscan nobility. Quello che ha indicato, signorina, è un Montepulciano d'Abruzzo da tavola. The words hung in the air like a spell. Victoria blinked. Her mouth fell open slightly. What? Elena did not repeat herself in Italian. Instead, she switched to English, but not the broken, hesitant English of a struggling waitress. This was perfect, crisp, the accent of someone who had been educated at the finest institutions, the kind of English that cost money to learn. What you pointed at, miss, is a table wine from Abruzzo. Elena's voice was steady, cool, professional. It is a simple Montepulciano, pleasant enough for a Tuesday dinner at a mid-range trattoria, but certainly not a Barolo. She paused, letting the words sink in. Mr. Harrison keeps it on the reserve list specifically to test tourists who pretend to know more than they do. It costs $15 wholesale. The markup is purely for entertainment value. Victoria's face was turning red, not the gentle flush of embarrassment. A deep, violent crimson that spread from her neck to her forehead. I would never dare serve it to a palate as refined as Mr. Crane's. Elena reached out and took the heavy leather wine book from where it sat in front of Victoria. Her movements were graceful, confident, the movements of someone who had done this 1,000 times. She flipped through the pages without looking down. Her fingers knew exactly where to go. Page 12. 3rd section. 4th line from the bottom. She turned the book around and placed it in front of Roman. If Mr. Crane desires the 1997 Barolo Riserva, it is here. Her finger rested on a line of elegant Italian script. Giacomo Conterno, Monfortino. One of only 800 bottles produced that year. Roman's eyes moved from Elena's face to the page, then back to her face. Elena continued, her voice taking on the cadence of a master sommelier presenting to distinguished guests. The 1997 was an exceptional vintage. The summer was warm and dry, which concentrated the flavors beautifully. On the nose, you will find tar, roses, and dried cherries. The palate offers layers of leather, tobacco, and dark fruit, with tannins that have softened magnificently over the past decades. She paused. I would recommend decanting for at least 2 hours before serving. 3 would be better. It deserves time to breathe. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. No one in the restaurant moved. No one breathed. Every eye was fixed on the scene at table 4. Mr. Harrison had been rushing over from across the room. He skidded to a halt 3 feet from the table, his mouth hanging open. His face was a mask of pure shock. The other waiters stood frozen at their stations. The wealthy patrons had forgotten their meals entirely. Victoria sat rigid in her chair. Her hands were trembling. Her perfectly applied makeup could not hide the fact that she had gone from predator to prey in the span of 60 seconds. She opened her mouth to speak, to scream, to say something, anything, that would salvage her dignity. But before a single sound could escape her lips, Roman Crane raised one finger. Just one. A small gesture. Almost imperceptible. But it was enough. Victoria's mouth snapped shut. The entire room seemed to lean forward. And Roman Crane, the most feared man in New York, the man who owned the skyline, the man whose whisper was louder than a gunshot, looked at Elena with something new in his cold gray eyes. Interest. That single raised finger held more power than 1,000 words. Victoria froze mid-breath. The retort she had been preparing died in her throat. Her mouth hung open for a moment, then slowly closed. The entire restaurant remained suspended in silence. Waiters stood like statues. Diners held their forks in midair. Even the soft background music seemed to fade into nothing. Roman lowered his hand. His gray eyes stayed fixed on Elena, studying her, analyzing her, the way a collector might examine a rare artifact he had stumbled upon unexpectedly. His head tilted slightly to one side. "Where did you study?" The question was simple, direct, but Elena understood what he was really asking. He was asking who she really was. How a woman in worn shoes and a frayed uniform could speak like a Florentine aristocrat and know wines like a master sommelier. Elena met his gaze. She did not look away. "Napa Valley Wine Academy, sir. Class of 2018. A flicker of something crossed Roman's face. Recognition, perhaps, or respect. The Napa Valley Wine Academy was not a place that accepted just anyone. It was elite, exclusive. The kind of institution that required connections and money and exceptional talent. He nodded slowly. Then he turned to Victoria. Victoria. His voice was calm, quiet, almost gentle. Victoria looked at him with desperate eyes. Her hand reached out toward his arm. "Roman, baby, the car is waiting." 3 words, delivered without emotion, without anger, without anything at all. Victoria's face went pale. "Roman, you can't be serious." Her voice cracked. The confident socialite was crumbling. "She's just a waitress. She's nobody. You can't possibly, I don't repeat myself." The temperature at the table dropped by 10 degrees. Roman did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The softness of his tone was far more terrifying than any shout could have been. It was the voice of a man who had never been disobeyed. The voice of a man who made people disappear. Victoria understood. She stood up abruptly. Her chair scraped against the floor with an ugly sound. Her hands were shaking. Her lips were pressed together so tightly they had turned white. She grabbed her clutch from the table and looked at Elena. The hatred in that gaze was pure, undiluted, the kind of hatred that promised retribution, that promised pain. "You'll regret this," Victoria hissed under her breath. Words meant only for Elena. Then she turned and walked away. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, sharp, angry, each step echoing through the silent restaurant like a countdown. Click, click, click. The front door opened, closed. She was gone. The restaurant exhaled. Patrons slowly returned to their meals, though their eyes kept darting toward table 4. Waiters began moving again, though their hands were not quite steady. Mr. Harrison remained rooted to his spot, looking like he might faint at any moment. Roman ignored all of it. He gestured to the empty chair across from him, the chair where Victoria had been sitting moments before. "Sit," Elena blinked. "Sir, sit down." His eyes held hers. "Choose the wine for me." It was not a request. Elena stood there, her heart pounding against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to apologize, to disappear back into the kitchen and pretend this night had never happened. But another voice whispered something different. "This is your chance." She looked at the empty chair. She looked at Roman Crane. She looked at the life she had been surviving for 5 years. And she made a choice. Elena sat down. The chair was still warm from Victoria's body. The leather was soft. Expensive. The kind of chair that cost more than Elena's monthly rent. She felt completely out of place. Her worn uniform against the pristine white tablecloth, her calloused hands resting where manicured fingers had been moments before. A waitress sitting at the table of the most powerful man in New York. It felt like a dream, or a trap. Mr. Harrison took a step forward. His face was a mask of barely concealed panic. This was wrong. This was against every protocol. A waitress could not sit with guests. It simply was not done. He opened his mouth to intervene. Roman's eyes flicked toward him. Just a glance. Half a second. Nothing more. Harrison went pale. He closed his mouth, turned around, and disappeared into the kitchen without another word. The bodyguards remained at their positions nearby, watching, silent. Roman turned back to Elena. "The Barolo," he said. "The one you recommended. Bring it." Elena hesitated for only a moment before signaling to another waiter. The young man nearly tripped over himself, rushing to the wine cellar. Minutes later, the bottle arrived. 1997 Giacomo Conterno Monfortino, covered in a thin layer of dust, handled like a sacred relic. Elena took the bottle. Her hands moved on instinct. Muscle memory from years of training. She examined the label, checked the fill level, inspected the cork through the glass. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to open it. Roman nodded. Elena cut the foil with practiced precision. She inserted the corkscrew slowly, carefully, the way she had been taught. The cork came out with a soft, satisfying pop. She poured a small amount into a glass, swirled it, held it to the candlelight. The color was deep garnet with hints of orange at the rim. Perfect aging. She brought the glass to her nose. Tar, roses, dried cherries, exactly as she had described. She took a small sip, let it roll across her tongue, felt the tannins, still present but softened by time, tasted the layers of leather and tobacco and dark fruit. She nodded. "It's perfect." She poured for Roman, then set the bottle aside to breathe further. Roman lifted his glass, swirled it once, tasted it. His expression did not change, but Elena saw something shift in his eyes. Approval. "Tell me about this wine," he said. And so she did. Elena talked about the Langhe Hills of Piedmont, about the Nebbiolo grape and its notoriously difficult temperament, about the Conterno family and their 4 generations of winemaking, about the 1997 growing season and why it had produced such exceptional fruit. She talked about soil composition and fermentation techniques and barrel aging. She talked, and Roman listened. He asked questions, intelligent questions, questions that showed he was not merely humoring her, but genuinely interested. The food came and went, course after course. Elena barely touched anything, too nervous to eat in front of him. But Roman ate slowly, methodically, never taking his eyes off her for long. An hour passed. Then another. The restaurant began to empty around them. Other patrons settled their bills and left, casting curious glances at table 4 as they went. Elena barely noticed. Then Roman set down his fork. "Why is a sommelier working as a waitress?" The question cut through the pleasant conversation like a knife. Elena's hand froze on her water glass. "Times are hard," she said carefully. "The economy. Jobs are difficult to find." "You're lying." Roman's voice was soft, matter of fact, not accusatory. Elena said nothing. "You look at the door every time someone walks in," he continued. "Your shoulders tense when you hear footsteps behind you. You flinch at loud noises." He leaned forward slightly. "You're running from someone." The words hung in the air between them. Elena's throat tightened. Her fingers gripped the water glass so hard she thought it might shatter. Deny it. Laugh it off. Make an excuse. But when she opened her mouth, nothing came out. Roman watched her. Those gray eyes saw everything. Every micro-expression, every twitch, every fear she tried to hide. "I know the eyes of someone who's afraid," he said quietly. "I've seen them in the mirror." Elena looked up at him. For a moment, the mask slipped. For a moment, she did not see the kingpin, or the criminal, or the monster that New York whispered about. She saw a man who understood something about fear, about hiding, about surviving. The moment stretched between them, silent, heavy. Then Roman leaned back. "Finish the wine," he said, his tone lighter. It would be a crime to waste a bottle this good. He did not press further. Elena exhaled slowly. They talked more, about wine, about Italy, about nothing important, but something had changed. The tension was still there. The danger was still there. But underneath it, something else had taken root, something neither of them expected. Roman stood. The movement was fluid, unhurried, the movement of a man who had never rushed for anything in his life. He reached for his jacket, draped over the back of the chair, and slipped it on. The fabric settled perfectly across his broad shoulders, not a single wrinkle, not a thread out of place. Elena started to rise as well, her instincts as a waitress kicking in. Clear the table, thank the guest, disappear. But Roman held up a hand. "Stay." She froze halfway out of her chair. Roman reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a slim leather wallet. He opened it, pulled out a stack of bills, and placed them on the white tablecloth. Elena stared. $5,000. Crisp. New. $100 bills stacked neatly like they meant nothing. "I can't accept this," she said quickly. "It's too much. The meal wasn't even— It's not a tip." Roman's voice was calm, final. He reached into another pocket and produced a small card. Black, matte, no name, no logo, just a phone number embossed in silver. He placed it on top of the money. "It's a deposit." Elena looked at the card, then back at him. "I need a sommelier for a dinner party," Roman said. "Saturday evening. Important guests. The address is on the back." Elena picked up the card with trembling fingers. She turned it over. An address in the Upper East Side, one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in Manhattan. Why me? The question came out before she could stop it. Roman looked at her for a long moment. "Because you didn't break." The words were simple, but they carried weight, meaning he had seen her humiliated, mocked, torn apart in front of an entire restaurant, and she had not crumbled. She had not cried. She had not begged. She had fought back. In Roman Crane's world, that meant something. He turned and walked toward the exit. Dante and the other bodyguard fell into step behind him, shadows moving in perfect synchronization. The remaining patrons in the restaurant watched in silence. No one dared to speak. Roman reached the door. Then he stopped. He turned his head slightly, not fully, just enough for his voice to carry back across the room. "And Elena." She jolted, her breath caught. He knew her name. She had never told him. She had not been wearing a name tag, but he knew. Of course he knew. Men like Roman Crane knew everything. "Whatever you're running from," he said, his voice low but clear. "They can't reach you if you're standing next to me." The words hung in the air like a promise, or a warning. Then he pushed through the door and disappeared into the night. The cold air rushed in for a brief moment before the door swung shut. Elena sat alone at table 4. She looked down at the black card in her hand, at the money on the table, at the empty wine glass that still smelled of Barolo. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. What just happened? "Sinclair," Mr. Harrison's voice cut through the fog. He was rushing toward her, his face red, his hands waving. "What in God's name was that? Do you have any idea what you've done? Sitting with a guest? Do you know who that was?" "Do you?" Elena did not hear him. She was still staring at the card. Saturday. In 4 days, she would walk into the lion's den, and she had no idea if she would walk out alive. The back door of Notte opened into darkness. Elena stepped out into the alley, pulling her thin coat tighter around her shoulders. The night air was cold. A light drizzle had begun to fall, misting her face and hair. The shift had ended 30 minutes ago, but Mr. Harrison had kept her late, lecturing, threatening, demanding to know what she had been thinking, sitting with a guest like that. Elena had barely heard a word. Her mind was still at table 4, still replaying the evening, still hearing Roman's voice. "Whatever you're running from, they can't reach you if you're standing next to me." What did that mean? Was it an offer? A threat? A test? She reached into her pocket and touched the black card. It was still there, still real. Saturday. She had 4 days to decide if she was brave or stupid. The alley was empty. Trash bins lined the walls. A single streetlight flickered at the far end, casting weak yellow light that barely reached the ground. Elena walked toward the main street, her footsteps echoing against the wet pavement. She did not hear the engine until it was too late. A black SUV roared around the corner, headlights off, moving fast. It screeched to a stop directly in front of her, blocking her path. Elena stumbled backward. The doors flew open. 2 men jumped out. Huge, built like mountains, faces hidden behind black masks. Elena turned to run. She made it 3 steps. A hand grabbed her arm. Another clamped over her mouth. She tried to scream, but the sound was smothered against a leather glove. She kicked. She clawed. She fought with everything she had. It was not enough. They lifted her off the ground like she weighed nothing, threw her into the back of the SUV. The door slammed shut. Darkness. Elena scrambled upright, her back pressing against the far door, her chest heaving, her eyes wild. "Easy, my dear. No need for dramatics." The voice came from the shadows. A light clicked on, soft, amber, just enough to illuminate the figure sitting across from her. Elena's blood turned to ice. Marcus Webb. He looked exactly as she remembered. 58 years old, but fighting it with expensive treatments and tailored suits. Silver hair swept back from a tanned face, blue eyes that crinkled warmly at the corners. The kind of face that belonged on a grandfather, on a senator, on a man you would trust with your life. Elena knew better. "Elena," Marcus said, his voice smooth as honey. 5 years. You've grown into quite a beautiful woman." Elena's hands curled into fists. "You framed my father." Her voice shook with rage. "You destroyed my family. You killed my mother." Marcus tilted his head, as if considering her words. "Your mother had a weak heart. Tragic, but hardly my fault. She died because of you." Marcus's smile did not waver. "Your father has something that belongs to me, Elena. Something he stole before he disappeared. The USB drive." Elena's heart stopped. "I don't know what you're talking about." Marcus Sehil, the disappointed sigh of a parent dealing with a difficult child. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a tablet, tapped the screen, turned it toward her. Video, a dark room, concrete walls, a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, and a man, Robert Sinclair, sat slumped in a metal chair. His hands were bound behind his back. His clothes were torn and filthy. His face, Elena's stomach lurched. His face was barely recognizable, bruised, swollen, one eye completely shut, blood caked around his nose and mouth. He was thin, so thin, like he had not eaten in weeks. As she watched, he coughed, a wet, rattling sound. Blood sprayed from his lips. "Dad," Elena whispered. Tears streamed down her face. "Dad." No, Marcus paused the video. "He's still alive. For now." Marcus tucked the tablet away. "You have 1 week. Bring me the USB drive. All of it. Every file. Every copy. And if I don't?" Marcus leaned forward. The warmth vanished from his face, revealing something cold and empty underneath. "Then I'll send you his fingers first. 1 per day. And when I run out of fingers, I'll start on other parts." Elena could not breathe. "And don't think about running to the police," Marcus added, settling back into his seat. "I own half the department. The other half is too afraid to act." He smiled again, that terrible, grandfatherly smile. 1 week, Elena. Choose wisely." He nodded to the driver. The door beside Elena flew open. Hands grabbed her, shoved her. She tumbled out of the SUV and hit the wet pavement hard. Her palms scraped against concrete. Her knees slammed into the ground. The door closed. The engine roared. The SUV disappeared into the night. Elena lay there in the rain. The water soaked through her clothes, mixed with the blood from her scraped hands, mixed with the tears pouring down her face. Her father was alive. Her father was being tortured, and she had 7 days to save him, or watch him die. Elena climbed the stairs to her apartment like a ghost. Her clothes were soaked through. Her hands were still bleeding from where they had scraped against the pavement. Her entire body trembled, though she could not tell if it was from the cold or the fear. Probably both. She fumbled with her keys, dropped them twice, finally managed to get the door open. The apartment was dark, cold. The radiator had given up hours ago. Water dripped from the broken pipe into the overflowing bucket. Elena did not turn on the lights. She walked to her bed and knelt down on the floor. Her fingers found the loose floorboard, pried it up, reached into the darkness beneath. The metal box was still there. She pulled it out and sat on the edge of her mattress, holding it in her lap. For a long moment, she just stared at it. Then she opened it. The USB drive sat inside, small and silver and innocent-looking. Such a tiny thing, no bigger than her thumb, but it contained enough secrets to destroy an empire. Elena picked it up, turned it over in her fingers. The memory came flooding back. 5 years ago, the night everything ended. Her father had come to her room at 3 a.m. His face was pale. His hands were shaking. He looked like a man who had seen his own death. "Elena." His voice was barely a whisper. "Listen to me carefully." He pressed the USB drive into her palm. "This contains everything. Bank records, transaction logs, communications, evidence of every crime Marcus Webb has ever committed. Money laundering, bribery, tax fraud." He paused. His eyes met hers. "Murder." Elena's blood ran cold. "Marcus killed people? 3 that I know of. Probably more." Her father's grip tightened on her hands. "This drive is the only proof. The only thing that can bring him down. Then we should go to the police." "No." The word was sharp, desperate. "Marcus owns the police, the prosecutors, half the judges in New York. If we go to them, we're dead before morning." He pulled her close, hugged her like he would never let go. "Keep it safe, Elena. Hide it. Don't tell anyone. Not anyone." "Dad, what's going to happen?" He pulled back, looked at her with eyes full of love and sorrow and fear. "I don't know, sweetheart, but this drive, it's our only card, our only leverage. As long as we have it, we have a chance." 2 days later, he was gone. Elena blinked. The memory faded. She was back in her cold, dark apartment, holding the drive that had cost her everything. If she gave it to Marcus, her father would live. But Marcus would continue his crimes. More people would die. More families would be destroyed. If she refused, her father would be tortured, killed, sent to her in pieces. There was no right answer. Elena sat in the darkness, tears streaming down her face. Then she remembered Roman's voice, low and certain. "Whatever you're running from, they can't reach you if you're standing next to me." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the black card. The silver numbers glinted in the faint light from the window. With her other hand, she grabbed her phone, opened the browser, typed 2 names, Roman Crane, Marcus Webb. The results loaded. Articles, news stories, rumors. Marcus Webb had been trying to expand his territory for years, moving into areas controlled by the Crane family, pushing, testing, probing for weakness. 2 years ago, it had turned violent. 3 of Roman's men had been killed in a warehouse fire, officially ruled an accident. Everyone knew it was not. The 2 families had been at war ever since. Cold War, mostly, but escalating. Elena stared at the screen. Roman Crane and Marcus Webb were enemies, the enemy of my enemy. She looked at the USB drive in one hand, the black card in the other. 2 impossible choices, 2 dangerous paths. But maybe, just maybe, there was a third option. Elena stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the city lights glittering through the rain. Saturday, the dinner party at the Crane mansion. She would go. She would find a way to talk to Roman alone, and she would make a deal with the devil. It was insane. It was suicidal. It was probably the stupidest decision she had ever made, but it was the only chance she had. Elena clutched the black card to her chest. Her eyes were no longer filled with tears. They were filled with fire. The Crane mansion rose out of the Upper East Side like a castle from another century. Elena stood on the sidewalk across the street, staring up at it. 5 stories of gray stone and iron gates. Turrets at the corners, gargoyles perched on the roofline, a private garden visible through the wrought iron fence, manicured to perfection even in winter. It looked like something that belonged in Europe, in a fairy tale, not in the middle of Manhattan. But here it was, real, imposing, terrifying. Elena looked down at herself. She was wearing the only decent dress she owned. Black, simple, bought 3 years ago at a thrift store for a job interview she never got. The fabric was starting to pill at the seams. The hem was slightly uneven. It would have to do. She took a deep breath and crossed the street. 2 guards stood at the gate. Massive men in black suits. They watched her approach with eyes that gave nothing away. "Name," one of them said. "Not a question, a command." "Elena Sinclair. I'm here for the dinner." "As a sommelier." The guard checked a tablet, scrolled, found her name. He nodded to his partner. The iron gate swung open. "Main entrance. Someone will meet you inside." Elena walked through. The garden was even more beautiful up close. Stone pathways wound between rose bushes and small fountains. Lanterns lined the walkway, casting warm golden light. The front door was enormous, dark wood carved with intricate patterns. It opened before she could knock. A butler in a formal uniform stood inside. "Miss Sinclair, this way, please." Elena stepped into another world. The foyer was larger than her entire apartment. Marble floors, a sweeping staircase, a crystal chandelier that sparkled like a constellation of stars. Paintings lined the walls, old masters, museum pieces. This was what real wealth looked like, not the flashy kind that screamed for attention, the quiet kind that did not need to prove anything to anyone. The butler led her through a series of hallways, each more opulent than the last. Finally, they reached a set of double doors. The dining room. "You will be responsible for the wine service this evening, Mr. Crane's instructions were specific. He trusts your judgment." The doors opened. Elena walked in. The dining room was magnificent. A table that seated 30. Fresh flowers in crystal vases, candles everywhere. And the guests Elena recognized faces from newspapers, from television, a congressman, a federal judge, the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, a famous actress, and others, men with cold eyes and expensive suits, men whose names never appeared in headlines but who pulled strings from the shadows. This was power, real power, gathered around a single table, and at the head of that table sat Roman Crane. He was watching her. Elena felt his gaze the moment she entered. Those gray eyes tracked her across the room as she took her position near the wine station. She did not look back. Not yet. Instead, she focused on her work. The wines had been pre-selected, but Elena adjusted the pairings as each course was announced. A burgundy with the first course, a Barolo with the meat, a Sauternes with dessert. She poured with precision, described each wine with confidence, answered questions from curious guests with the ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times. Because she had. In another life, the guests noticed. Whispers rippled around the table. Who is that girl? Where did Roman find her? She knows more about wine than my personal sommelier. Elena kept her face neutral, professional, but inside, her heart was pounding. Every few minutes, she glanced toward the head of the table. Every time, Roman was watching her. His expression never changed, that cold, unreadable mask. But there was something in his eyes, something that made Elena's breath catch. Interest, calculation, and something else she could not name. The dinner lasted 3 hours. Courses came and went. Conversations rose and fell. Deals were made in subtle glances and careful words. Elena saw none of it. She was too aware of the man at the head of the table, too aware of every glance, every heartbeat. Finally, the guests began to leave. Handshakes, air kisses, promises to meet again soon. The dining room emptied. Elena began gathering the remaining wine bottles, her hands shaking slightly. She had come here with a plan. Ask for a private conversation. Tell him about Marcus. Propose an alliance. But how? When? What if he refused? What if Elena? She turned. Roman stood 3 feet away. She had not heard him approach. He was still in his suit from dinner. Still perfect. Still terrifying. His gray eyes held hers with an intensity that made her mouth go dry. Walk with me, he said. It was not a request. Roman led her through a maze of hallways. Elena followed in silence, her heels clicking against marble floors. They passed rooms filled with priceless art, libraries lined with leather-bound books, a private gallery that held paintings she had only seen in textbooks. Finally, they reached a set of glass doors. Roman pushed them open. The night air hit Elena like a wave, cold, crisp, carrying the faint smell of snow. They were on a balcony, a wide stone terrace overlooking Manhattan. The city stretched out below them, a sea of lights glittering against the darkness, towers of glass and steel, rivers of headlights moving through the streets, a million lives unfolding in the shadows. It was beautiful and terrifying. Elena walked to the edge and gripped the iron railing. The metal was cold against her palms. Roman stood beside her, close, but not touching. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Roman turned his head. Now tell me the truth, he said. All of it. Elena's heart hammered in her chest. This was it, the moment she had been planning for since that night in the rain, the moment that would determine whether she lived or died. She could lie, make something up, protect her secrets. But she looked into those gray eyes and knew that would be pointless. Roman Crane had not built an empire by being fooled by lies. He would see through her in seconds. The truth was her only weapon. Elena took a breath, and she told him everything. She told him about her father, Robert Sinclair, the Deputy Secretary of the Treasury, the man who had dedicated his life to public service. She told him about Marcus Webb, the trusted friend, the secret monster, the man who had framed her father for crimes he did not commit. She told him about the scandal, the headlines, the shame. She told him about her mother, the heart attack, the funeral, the empty grave where Elena had sworn revenge. She told him about the USB drive, the evidence, the proof of Marcus Webb's crimes, money laundering, bribery, murder. She told him about 5 years of running, 5 years of hiding, 5 years of being invisible, and she told him about 3 nights ago, the black SUV, the kidnapping, Marcus's face, her father on that video, broken and bleeding. 1 week, that was all she had. When she finished, her voice was hoarse, her eyes were wet. Roman had not moved. His face was unreadable throughout her story, that cold mask never slipping. But Elena noticed something. His hands. They were gripping the iron railing so tightly his knuckles had gone white. And when she mentioned Marcus Webb's name, something flickered in his eyes. Something dark. Something dangerous. Hatred. Marcus Webb, Roman said slowly, has been trying to take my territory for 2 years. His voice was soft, controlled, but Elena could hear the rage simmering beneath. He killed 3 of my men last month, burned them alive in a warehouse and called it an accident. Elena's stomach turned. The police ruled it accidental, Roman continued, because Marcus owns the police, just like he owns the prosecutors, just like he owns half the judges in this city. He turned to face her fully. We have a common enemy, Elena. Hope flickered in her chest. Then help me, she said. Help me save my father. Roman studied her for a long moment, his gray eyes searching her face, looking for weakness, looking for lies. Finding neither. What do I get in return? Elena reached into her small clutch. Her fingers found the USB drive. She held it up between them. This, she said. Everything on it. Bank records, communications, proof of every crime Marcus Webb has ever committed. Enough evidence to destroy him forever. Roman looked at the drive, then back at her. Silence stretched between them. The wind howled around the balcony. The city lights flickered below. Finally, Roman spoke. Deal, Elena exhaled. But, he continued, his voice hardening, you stay here until this is over. My house, my rules, my protection. You don't leave. You don't contact anyone. You don't do anything without my approval. Elena hesitated. She was trading one prison for another, one captor for another. But what choice did she have? Agreed, she said. Roman nodded. He extended his hand. Elena looked at it. The hand of a killer, a criminal, a man who ruled New York's underworld through fear and violence. She took it. His grip was firm, warm, surprisingly gentle. Welcome to the war, Elena, he said. Their hands stayed clasped for a moment longer than necessary. Then Roman released her. He turned and walked back toward the glass doors. Dante will show you to your room. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we plan. He paused at the threshold. And Elena? She looked up. You made the right choice. Then he was gone. Elena stood alone on the balcony, the cold wind whipping through her hair. She had just made a deal with the devil. She could only pray she would survive it. The room they gave Elena was larger than her entire Brooklyn apartment. A 4-poster bed with silk sheets, a marble bathroom with a tub deep enough to swim in, a walk-in closet filled with clothes in her exact size, fresh flowers on every surface. It felt like a gilded cage. But a cage was still safer than the streets. And right now, safety was all that mattered. Day 1. Roman summoned Elena to his study at 9 in the morning. The room was dark, wood-paneled walls, leather furniture, a massive desk covered with papers and screens. It smelled of old books and expensive whiskey. Dante stood guard at the door, silent, watchful. The USB, Roman said. Let's see what we're working with. Elena handed it over. Roman plugged it into a secure laptop. The screen filled with folders, hundreds of them, bank statements, wire transfers, emails, photographs, video files, enough evidence to bring down a small country. Roman scrolled through the files, his expression growing darker with each one. Money laundering, he muttered. Billions, routed through shell companies in the Caymans, Switzerland, Singapore. He clicked on another folder. Bribes to federal judges, payments to police commissioners, a senator on his payroll, another folder, and murder. Roman's voice went cold. 3 bodies, made to look like accidents. All of them, people who got in his way. Elena watched in silence. She had known the drive contained damning evidence, but seeing it laid out like this, file after file of corruption and death, made her stomach turn. Then Roman clicked on the largest folder. A prompt appeared on screen. Biometric lock. Voice recognition required. Roman looked at Elena. Your father was clever, he said. The most important files are locked behind your voice. Only you can open them. Elena leaned toward the microphone. Elena Catherine Sinclair, she said clearly. The screen flashed green. ACCESS granted. The final folder opened. Inside were the crown jewels. Routing numbers for Marcus's hidden accounts. The blueprint of his entire financial network. Enough to freeze every asset he owned. Roman smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Now we have him. Day 2. They spent 14 hours mapping Marcus Webb's organization. His lieutenants. His safe houses. His legitimate businesses that served as fronts. The corrupt officials in his pocket. Roman's people cross-referenced everything with their own intelligence. Filled in gaps. Connected dots. By midnight, they had a complete picture. Marcus Webb was powerful. But he was not invincible. Day 3. Roman revealed the plan. We give him what he wants, he said. Or at least, we make him think we do. Elena frowned. You want to hand over the USB? I want to hand over you. Her blood went cold. Roman raised a hand before she could speak. Listen, we arrange a meeting. Tell Marcus you've agreed to exchange the USB for your father. He'll bring Robert to verify the files are real. That's when we strike. A trap, Elena whispered. A trap, Roman confirmed. My men will be positioned around the meeting point. The moment your father is clear, we move. And Marcus? Roman's eyes went flat. Marcus won't leave that building alive. Day 4. Something shifted between them. It started small. A lingering glance across the dinner table. A brush of fingers when passing documents. Conversations that stretched past midnight. Elena learned things about Roman that the newspapers never printed. He read poetry, Frost and Neruda and Rilke. He kept a first edition of Dante's Inferno in his desk drawer. He played piano, beautifully. Elena heard him one night, a Chopin nocturne drifting through the empty hallways, and he told her about his mother. Maria, he said quietly. They were sitting in his study, the fire burning low. She worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. Cleaned houses in the morning, waitressed at night. Never complained, never asked for anything. His jaw tightened. She was beautiful, kind, the best person I've ever known. What happened to her? Elena asked softly. Roman was silent for a long moment. A customer at the restaurant where she worked. Rich, powerful. He humiliated her in front of everyone, called her trash, threw wine in her face. Elena's heart clenched. 3 days later, I found her in the bathtub. She had swallowed a bottle of pills. Roman. I was 14. His voice was hollow. I held her hand while we waited for the ambulance. She was already cold. Elena reached out, touched his arm. He did not pull away. I'm sorry, she whispered. He looked at her with eyes that held decades of pain. So when I saw Victoria humiliating you in that restaurant, he paused. I saw my mother. I saw every person who was ever made to feel small by someone with money and power. Elena understood then. Roman Crane was not just a monster. He was a wounded boy who had built an empire to protect himself from ever feeling helpless again. Day 5. The night before. Elena could not sleep. She stood at her window, watching the city lights blur through her tears. Tomorrow, everything would end. One way or another, her father would be free. Or he would be dead. She would survive. Or she would not. A knock at the door. She turned. Roman stood in the doorway. He was still dressed, though his tie was loosened and his sleeves rolled up. You should rest, he said. I can't. Her voice broke. What if it doesn't work? What if Marcus kills him before we can? The tears came faster now. Roman crossed the room in 3 strides. He stood before her. Close. So close she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. His hand rose, hesitated, then gently brushed the tears from her cheek. I won't let you lose him, he said quietly. I promise. Elena looked up into his gray eyes, and for once, they were not cold. They were soft, vulnerable, human. She did not know who moved first, but suddenly his lips were on hers. The kiss was soft, gentle, a question rather than a demand. She answered. Her hands found his chest, his arms wrapped around her waist. The world outside disappeared. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Roman pressed his forehead against hers. Tomorrow, he whispered. Tomorrow we end this. Elena nodded. They stood there, holding each other, until the first light of dawn crept through the window. Then they went to war. The warehouse loomed out of the Brooklyn night like a rotting corpse. Abandoned for years, windows shattered, walls covered in graffiti, the kind of place where bodies were dumped and never found. The perfect location for a trap. Elena sat in the back of the black SUV, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She was wearing dark clothes, practical shoes, no jewelry, nothing that could catch the light or slow her down. Roman sat beside her. His face was calm, unreadable, but she could feel the tension radiating from his body. Dante was driving. Behind them, 3 more vehicles carried Roman's most trusted men. 12 soldiers in total, armed, trained, ready to die. The convoy pulled to a stop a block from the warehouse. Roman turned to Elena. Remember the plan, he said quietly. Unlock the files. Stall. The moment your father is clear, get down and stay down. Elena nodded. Her throat was too tight to speak. Roman reached over and squeezed her hand. I'll get him out, I promise. Then he released her, and they stepped into the night. The warehouse interior was vast and empty. Concrete floors stained with decades of oil and rust. Steel pillars stretching up to a ceiling lost in shadows. A single work light hung in the center, casting a harsh white circle in the darkness. Marcus Webb stood in that circle of light. He looked impeccable. Gray suit, blue tie, silver hair perfectly styled. The picture of a respectable businessman. Except for the 30 armed men surrounding him. They spread out across the warehouse floor, rifles raised, faces hard, professional killers, every one of them. And in front of Marcus, held upright by 2 guards, was Robert Sinclair. Elena's heart shattered. Her father was barely recognizable, gaunt, broken. His clothes hung off his skeletal frame like rags. His face was a mask of bruises, one eye swollen completely shut, dried blood crusted around his mouth and nose. But he was alive. He was breathing. "Dad!" Elena screamed. Robert's head lifted slowly. His one good eye found her face. "Elena." His voice was a rasping whisper. "Run, please, run." "Touching," Marcus said dryly. Truly heartwarming. He stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking against the concrete. "But let's dispense with the theatrics, shall we? The USB drive." Now. Roman moved forward, Elena beside him. His men fanned out behind them, outnumbered but not outgunned. "First, release Sinclair," Roman said. His voice was ice. Marcus laughed. A cold, hollow sound. "You're in no position to negotiate, Roman. I have 30 guns pointed at your head. You have what? A dozen men?" He gestured to a folding table near the center of the room. A laptop sat on it, screen glowing. "The drive first. Unlock it. Then we'll discuss terms." Roman's jaw tightened, but he nodded to Elena. This was the plan. This was always the plan. Elena walked forward on shaking legs. The distance from Roman to the laptop felt like miles. She could feel the guns tracking her, the weight of 30 hostile gazes. She reached the table, plugged in the USB drive. The prompt appeared. Biometric lock. Voice recognition required. Elena leaned toward the microphone. Her eyes found Roman's across the room. He gave the slightest nod. Elena spoke the code phrase, the phrase her father had chosen years ago, the phrase only she knew. La verità vi renderà liberi. The truth will set you free. In Italian. The screen flashed green. Access granted. Files began scrolling across the screen. Bank accounts, transaction records, routing numbers, the complete financial blueprint of Marcus Webb's criminal empire. Marcus's eyes went wide. His tongue darted across his lips. "Yes," he breathed. "Yes, it's all here. Everything." He looked up at his men. "Kill them. All of them." Elena's blood froze. "But you promised," Marcus smiled. That terrible, grandfatherly smile. "I'm a criminal, dear. I don't make deals." He leaned close enough for her to smell his cologne. "I make corpses." The guards raised their weapons, and the lights went out. Total darkness. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then chaos erupted. Gunfire exploded from every direction. Muzzle flashes strobed through the blackness like lightning. Screams and shouts echoed off the concrete walls. Elena dropped to the floor. She could see nothing, hear nothing but the deafening roar of combat. But Roman could see. Night vision contacts. Military grade. He had prepared for exactly this moment. He moved through the darkness like a ghost. His silenced pistol spat once, twice, 3 times. Each shot found its mark. Marcus's men fell without knowing what hit them. Dante and the others joined the assault. Disciplined, efficient, taking out the enemy with surgical precision. Elena crawled across the floor, staying low, staying out of the crossfire. She had to reach her father. Her hands found concrete, found shell casings, found something warm and wet that she refused to think about. Then she found him. "Dad." She grabbed his arm. "Dad, it's me. We have to go." Robert was barely conscious. His body sagged against her. "Elena, my Elena, don't talk. Just move." She hauled him upright, his weight nearly crushing her, step by agonizing step. She dragged him toward the back of the warehouse, toward the exit, toward safety. The gunfire was dying down. Roman's men were winning, but something was wrong. Elena looked back over her shoulder. In the chaos, in the darkness, in the storm of bullets and blood, Marcus Webb had disappeared, and so had the laptop. They burst through the rear exit into the cold night air. Dante was there, waiting beside an idling SUV. "Get him inside!" Elena shouted. Dante grabbed Robert, lifting him effortlessly into the back seat. "Get in," Dante ordered Elena. "We need to move." Elena looked back at the warehouse. Gunfire still crackled inside. Roman was still in there, fighting, killing, and Marcus was escaping with everything. "Elena, now!" She turned to Dante. "Get my father to safety." "What?" Elena stepped back from the car. "Marcus is still in there. He has the laptop. I'm going back." "Are you insane?" "Roman will. Roman needs help." She slammed the car door shut. "Go. Now. I'll be fine." Dante hesitated for 1 second. Then training took over. The SUV roared away, carrying her father to safety. Elena turned and ran back into the warehouse. She was not a waitress anymore. She was not a victim. She was a woman who had lost everything and refused to lose anything more. And she would be damned if she let Roman Crane die alone. Elena plunged back into the darkness. The warehouse was a nightmare of smoke and shadows. Bodies littered the floor. The stench of gunpowder and blood hung thick in the air. Emergency lights flickered weakly, casting everything in a hellish red glow. She moved through the carnage, searching. Where was Roman? Where was Marcus? Then she heard it. A voice, echoing from somewhere deeper in the building. She followed the sound, slipping through a doorway into what must have once been an office. Bookshelves lined the walls. Old furniture lay scattered and broken. And there, in the center of the room, she found them. Roman was pinned behind a concrete pillar. His gun was empty. Blood trickled from a wound on his shoulder. His face was pale, but his eyes were still burning with defiance. Marcus Webb stood 10 feet away. His expensive suit was torn and dirty. His silver hair was disheveled. But in his hand, he held a pistol aimed directly at Roman's head. "The great Roman Crane," Marcus said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "The silent king, the man who owned Manhattan." He stepped closer. "And now look at you, bleeding, helpless, about to die in a filthy warehouse." Roman said nothing. His gray eyes never wavered. Marcus raised the gun. "Any last words?" "Just one," Roman said quietly. "Duck." Marcus frowned, and Elena moved. She had spotted it the moment she entered the room. A heavy Magnum bottle of wine sitting on a shelf. Above it, a bronze bust of some forgotten industrialist, perched precariously on a wooden bracket. She did not think. She acted. Her hand closed around the bottle. She hurled it with every ounce of strength she possessed. The bottle flew across the room and smashed into the wooden bracket. The bracket snapped. The bronze bust plummeted. It struck Marcus's arm with a sickening crunch. Marcus screamed. The gun flew from his shattered hand, clattering across the floor. Roman exploded from behind the pillar. He crossed the distance in 2 strides and slammed into Marcus, driving him to the ground. Fists flew. Bones cracked. Marcus tried to fight back, but he was no match for Roman's fury. Seconds later, it was over. Roman stood over Marcus's broken body, the fallen gun now in his hand. He aimed it at Marcus's head. Then he looked at Elena. "He's your enemy," Roman said, his voice rough. "Your call." Elena walked forward slowly. She looked down at Marcus Webb, the man who had destroyed her family, who had killed her mother, who had tortured her father, who had stolen 5 years of her life. He looked so small now, so pathetic. Blood dripped from his mouth. His eyes were wide with terror. "Please," Marcus whimpered. "Please, I can pay you. I have money. Millions. Billions. Just let me. Your money is gone," Elena said quietly. Marcus froze. "The code I spoke. La verità vi renderà liberi." It wasn't just a password. Elena knelt down, her face inches from his. "It was a trigger. The moment I said those words, a virus uploaded to your system. Every account, every asset, every penny you ever stole." She leaned closer. "Wiped. All of it. Gone." Marcus's face went white. "You have nothing now," Elena whispered. "No money. No power. No empire. You're just a broken old man lying in his own blood." She stood up. "You took everything from me. My father, my mother, my life." Her voice hardened. "Now you have nothing." She looked at Roman, nodded once. Roman pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed through the warehouse. Marcus Webb's body went still. Silence settled over the room like a shroud. Elena stood there, staring at the man who had haunted her nightmares for 5 years. She felt no joy, no triumph, just a hollow emptiness and relief. Deep, bone-deep relief. It was over. Arms wrapped around her from behind. Roman pulled her close, his chest warm against her back. She turned in his embrace and buried her face in his shoulder. Neither of them spoke. There were no words for this moment, just 2 survivors, holding each other in the ruins of their enemies. Finally, Roman tilted her chin up. He kissed her. It was not gentle this time. It was fierce, desperate. A kiss that tasted of blood and smoke and victory. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "Let's go home," Roman said. Elena nodded. Home. For the first time in 5 years, she had one. The rain in Manhattan was soft that evening. It misted down from gray skies, turning the city lights into watercolor smears. People hurried along the sidewalks with umbrellas and upturned collars. But inside La Notte, the atmosphere was warm. The restaurant had changed hands 3 months ago. New ownership, new management, a new beginning. Elena Sinclair walked through the dining room, greeting guests, checking on tables, ensuring everything was perfect. She was not wearing a waitress uniform. She was wearing a tailored charcoal suit. Her hair was styled elegantly. Her shoes were Italian leather. A simple diamond pendant hung at her throat. She moved through the restaurant not as a servant, but as its owner. At table 4, a familiar figure sat reading a newspaper. Robert Sinclair looked like a different man. Healthy, strong. The bruises had healed long ago. His hair had grown back silver and distinguished. His eyes, both of them now clear and bright, sparkled when he saw his daughter. "Inventory is done, Dad," Elena said, kissing his cheek. "Good." Robert smiled. "Now go. He's waiting." Elena walked to the private booth at the back of the restaurant. Roman Crane sat there, but he looked nothing like the terrifying kingpin who had walked into this restaurant 6 months ago. He wore a casual sweater. His hair was slightly tousled. The permanent tension in his shoulders had softened. Even his eyes seemed warmer somehow. On the table between them sat a bottle of wine. Barolo, 1997. Giacomo Conterno, the same wine that had started everything. "You know what day it is?" Roman asked. Elena slid into the seat across from him. "Anniversary of the day you kicked Victoria out?" Roman laughed. A real laugh, the kind she had only begun to hear in recent months. "Anniversary of the day I found the only person who could read the menu." He reached into his pocket. Elena's breath caught. He placed a small velvet box on the table. "This isn't a command," Roman said, his gray eyes soft. "It's a proposal." Elena looked at the box, then at the man who had saved her father, who had fought beside her, who had held her through nightmares and celebrated her victories. The man she loved. She reached across the table, but not for the box. She picked up the wine bottle. "Then pour the wine, Roman," she said, a smile playing at her lips. "We have a lot to discuss." Roman's answering smile was brighter than any diamond could ever be. He poured. They drank. And outside, the rain continued to fall on Manhattan, washing the city clean. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end of this story. If Elena's journey touched your heart, if you felt her pain and celebrated her triumph, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support means everything to us. It helps us create more stories like this one, stories of hope, resilience, and the incredible strength of the human spirit. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our daily uploads. We bring you emotional, inspiring stories every single day. Now we want to hear from you. What did you feel while watching Elena's story? Have you ever been underestimated or looked down upon? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose between giving up and fighting back? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. Your stories, your experiences, your feelings, they inspire us and connect us as a community. Tell us, if you were Elena, would you have gone back into that warehouse? We truly want to know what is in your heart. And with that, we come to the end of today's story. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of our family. We wish you good health, happiness, and peace in your daily life. May you find strength in difficult moments and joy in simple ones. May you always remember that no matter how dark things seem, the dawn is always coming. Take care of yourselves and the people you love. Goodbye for now, and we will see you in the next video.